Welcome to the Arizona State Museum's Border Barriers History and Impact Talk series. This is the last of 8 talks that we're sharing via Zoom about this topic. If you have not seen previous talks, I encourage you to go to our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and search Arizona State Museum, it'll come up. Many of the talks, not all of them, have been recorded and are available there. I'm Lisa Falk. I'm head of community engagement at the Arizona State Museum, and I'll serve as a host tonight. As some of you know, the Arizona State Museum is part of the University of Arizona, and we're located on the ancestral lands of the Tonatam and Pasco Yaquis peoples here in the Sonoran Desert. The museum's collections and research focus on the indigenous people of the Southwest and Northwest Mexico, and we present programs exploring the history and cultures of this region. Because of COVID, the museum unfortunately is still closed. But just before we closed, we had opened an exhibit called A History of Walls, the Borders We Build. And you can go to our website and you can read the script for the most of the exhibit. There are some pieces that are missing there, but most of it's there, and see some images. So we're offering this series in conjunction with that exhibit. And we are thankful for a grant from the Arizona Humanities that helps support this, as well as our colleagues over at the UA Center for Latin American Studies for their support. Speakers have been presenting and continue to present various perspectives on the history and current reality of various border walls. So tonight we'll focus on the US-Mexico wall and its impact on people living in the borderlands, crossing through the border, or separated by a wall through the understanding of fiction writers. Today we will hear 3 different stories of border experiences written for 3 different audiences: adults, and young children. And I promise that no matter who they are primarily written for, all of these will fill your heart. Tonight we're going to start with Dr. Diane de Anada's picture book, Mango Moon, which tells a heartbreaking story of family separation through the feelings of a young girl whose father is deported. Dr. de Anda will be followed by Jorge Argueta, the author of Caravan to the North, Maesel's Long Journey, about a young boy who journeys north riding on an El Beast to escape violence at home. Dr. Lawrence Taylor will then share from his book, Tales from the Desert Borderland, which is a book of 8 connected short stories based on ethnographic research conducted over many years on both sides of the US-Mexico border. And now I'm going to start by introducing our first author, and then I'll introduce the others more fully when we come to their presentations. So I'm going to introduce Dr. Diane de Anada, and she's a professor emerita in the Department of Social Welfare at UCLA in California. Her short stories, essays, and poetry have appeared in Rosebud, Stray Light, Storyteller, Saguaro, El Grito, Pacific Review, Bilingual Review, Copperfield Review, and its first anthology, Frog Pond, Modern Haiku, Bottle Rockets, Presents Ruminate, Third Wednesday, and others. She has also published 12 children's books, 7 picture books, 3 collections of short stories, and 2 board books, a number of which have won multiple awards, as well as poetry for children in all the leading children's magazines. 3 more children's books were released in 2021, and she writes satirical articles, most of which appear on a regular basis in Humor Times. She has also published a collection of 40 flash fiction stories titled LA Flash. Her bicultural background as a 3rd-generation Latina is often evident in her work. In her professional role, Dr. de Anada served as editor of the Journal of Ethnic and Cultural Diversity and Social Work for 12 years. She has edited 4 books dealing with issues related to ethnically diverse populations and has published numerous articles in scholarly journals on issues of adolescent populations. In addition, she has authored 2 cognitive behavioral programs, violence prevention for adolescents and stress management for adolescents. We have very prolific authors, all 3 of our authors tonight. And so tonight, Diane de Anada will read from her award-winning picture book, Mango Moon. And if you give me just a second, I'll pull up her PowerPoint.
Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone first, and I'm pleased that so many people are interested in the important issues we're going to talk about today. This is the dedication to my book. It's to all families who suffer forced separation, whose love reaches beyond borders. And that's the message of this particular book.
Wait a minute, this is on the, Let me get it to the front page. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
There you go.
Here's the title, Mango Moon. There's a full moon out tonight. Poppy called it a mango moon, the last night we stood on the porch together. We watched the bright orange ball, the color of the slice of mango in my hand, rise in the sky. The chill catches my shoulder without Poppy's arm around me to keep me warm. But I stay anyway, because this will be the last night I will welcome the moon from my porch. Everything changed the day they came to Poppy's work and took him away. Mama picked us up from school with her eyes all red. Maricela and Manuel, she said, your Poppy won't be coming home for a while. She told us it was all right for us to cry, and she did too. After that, Mama couldn't pick us up from school anymore because she had to get another job. We took the school bus home instead and couldn't play outside with our friends after school. Mama said we had to stay in the house and lock the door to make sure we were safe until she got home. That was months ago. Now there are boxes all over the house. We are moving. Mama says she doesn't make enough money, even with her second job, to pay for everything by herself. The swing set Poppy made for us has to stay behind. He won't be here to push me on the swing one last time before we leave. We are going to move in with my tios and cousins for a while. It will be fun to share a bedroom with my cousin Malena, but I am sad that I will have to change schools and say goodbye to all my friends. Mama says we are lucky. She met other moms when she visited my dad, who had no places for their families to go when they had to move. I get to stay on my soccer team, but it feels different now that Poppy isn't our coach anymore. I miss hearing him cheer and laugh when we score a goal. Last week was my birthday. I was 10 years old. Friends came to our house and we had balloons and a cake and presents and even a bouncy house. But Poppy wasn't there to pull the rope for the piñata up and down as we tried to hit it, so it wasn't the same. A mean boy at school said, they took your dad away because he did something bad. It made me feel sad and mad at the same time. Mama says Poppy never did anything wrong. He just didn't have papers. I don't understand why they would send him so far away because of some papers. I got scared and asked if they could take her away too, or even me and my brother. She said my brother and I were safe because we were born here, and that she had a special card that kept her safe. I wish they'd give Poppy a card so he could be safe with us too. They have kept Poppy in a place far away from us for a long time. He said it wasn't a good place for children to see, so Mama goes by herself on a bus to visit him. Even though it wasn't Valentine's Day, I cut a heart out of red paper and wrote, I love you, Poppy, on it for Mama to give to him. Poppy writes me little notes that come in the mail with letters to Mama. It is exciting to get my own mail, but I would rather have my dad here instead. I keep all the notes in a jewelry box I got for my birthday. When I miss Poppy a lot, I take them out and read them again and again. Mama says they will be sending Poppy to live in another country very soon. I am scared because I heard her and my aunt talking about how they left that country because it was too dangerous. My stomach has been hurting a lot lately. The doctor said I wasn't really sick. He said it was because of all the changes and from missing my dad so much. Mama is worried about me, but how can I stop missing my dad? She tells me love is like the orange moon, that Poppy and I feel its glow no matter where we are. The orange moon is high in the night sky now. I wonder if Poppy is thinking about me too, under the same mango moon. Yeah, I wanted to give you a little bit of background on kind of what my purpose was in writing the book the way I did. Okay. First of all, and the most important reason was to give voice to the families and the children who suffer in silence. The second thing is to help children, not just children, but children and their parents who read some of these books with them and to them, to get a realistic appreciation of what these families' experiences are. I think it's very important, in particular for children, to develop empathy for people whose life circumstances are very different from their own. That's why I wrote it in the first person. It's the child themselves, and it's I, so the child reads I and reads it as though they're the child experiencing it as it goes through it. And the parents also can hopefully get the same type of feeling as they do it. A professor at UCLA named Norma Fischbach is famous for her work on empathy. And one of the things she says, it's very important to begin very young with children to develop this. And it is the best protection we have against children developing violent tendencies. Also, it's important that I made sure that you saw that the family was part of the community as a whole. These were not isolated people. He was the coach on a team. They had a house. It was so permanent, he had actually put in the swing set that they couldn't take with them. He was working in the community. So these were not strangers who would come into the country. These are people who were part and parcel of the community where the family was ripped apart. It also provides a model for parents and how to talk to children when they can't fix a situation. A lot of things come up that parents can't fix for children, even though they would like to do it. So how do you talk to a child then about this situation? And the mother takes this and understands this. She tells the children, first of all, it's okay to cry. Secondly, she tells them that, see the orange moon? Love really goes beyond borders. And no matter what happens, the love between you and your father is still there. Also, I'm hoping that the book will open up some discussion opportunities in a family to be able to discuss these kinds of issues and others. And if you don't mind, Lisa, I want to show you, I have another book, did the same thing too. It's called The Day Abuelo Got Lost. And it's a little boy talking about his interaction with his grandfather as grandfather goes into dementia. And again, you see the child's perspective, and the family, the adult can see look at it through the child's eyes. But on top of it, they also show how to explain to the child and how to deal with the situation in a loving way and the most positive way, again, in a situation, again, they cannot solve for the child. And I think those are very important points. I want to talk a little bit about how I got involved in this particular thing. I'm in social welfare, so I've always been dealing with issues related to families and children in my area, and particularly a lot of often immigrant families. So it's been a long-standing concern. And as the immigration situation in our country got more and more hostile, I became much more concerned and felt extremely powerless. What can we do? I tried a number of things that were minimal. When the first group of children came in, unaccompanied minors, they were busing them around the country, and they bused a group into San Diego. And these poor children, there were people jeering at them as they were coming into San Diego. It was horrible. My closest friend was there, and so we called Border Angels. If you don't know about Border Angels, they're the people who put the water in the desert for the people who are traveling through. So we called them. And so my friend and I got together, we got backpacks, and Arctic Biblical Press, this is one of my books, got a grant, and they were able to make take our books and make them into these kind of comic book versions, and they're bilingual, and we can give these away free. The only thing we have to pay for the mailing. So we got backpacks and stuffed them with this, so the children would at least have something that was familiar to them. They're going into an all English speaking hostel place, and this is bilingual, so they could have at least something that they could hold on to, that would maybe give them a little bit of sense of security. As this thing increased and the separation of the children continued, the separation was initiated of the children from their parents. Again, I felt powerless and wanted to do something. So I contacted, through a friend of mine, immigration lawyer, Peter Shea. If any of you have read anything about the legal the people involved in the legal process for these children. That's Peter Shea. He's the head of the Center for Human Rights and Institutional Law. And he was the one who got the injunction to be able to get, only one who could go into all these places and check on the rights of the children, get medical people in there, etc. So again, Arte Publico allowed me to get 1,500 of these books, of these different ones sent in for these children. In the midst of all this going on, I was contacted by Albert Whitman, by a woman named Sue Tarski. And she said, I've been looking for someone who could write a book about the separation, about children being separated from their, or families being torn apart by all this. So the opportunity was there. Again, this is a tiny little thing, but whatever, we are obviously powerless in many ways as far as is concerned. Our representatives in California are fortunately very much in line with our beliefs, but that's not the sense across the entire country. So it was on the basis of that I was offered this opportunity. She said, try it out. She liked what I wrote, and this is what was the result. Okay.
Thanks. And we'll have a chance to offer some audience questions after all of our authors have had time to share. But thank you for that background and for sharing your beautiful and really it's really sad, but it's also hopeful.
Yes, I tried to make it hopeful, and the sense that no matter what is done to you, it doesn't mean it breaks the family.
Right. So I'm going to turn to our next author now. Jorge Argueta is a native Salvadoran of Pipu Naha descent. He is an award-winning author of picture books and poetry for young children. He has won the International Latino Book Award, the Americas Book Award, the Hopkins Poetry Award, the NAPPA Gold Award, and the Independent Publisher Book Award for Multicultural Fiction for Juveniles, probably among others. His books have also been named for the Americas Award Commended List, the USBBY Outstanding International Books Honor List, the LA Notable Book List, the Maka Pen Award for Human Rights in Children's Literature Honor Books List, Kirkus Reviews Best Children's Books, and the Cooperative Children's Book Center Choices. Mr. Argueta has ignited in youth a love of poetry, stories, and writing through his books and educational presentations. He left El Salvador when he was 19 years old due to the ongoing civil war in El Salvador. And today he lives in both San Francisco and his home village in El Salvador, where he has built 3 libraries so that children can learn to love books. He will speak with us tonight about the dangerous journey north that children and family feel compelled to take to reach a place they can safely live. Kirkus Reviews wrote about his book, Caravan to the North. With tenderness and humanity, this bilingual book describes the hopes, fears, and uncertainties of the thousands of displaced children that arrive every year at the southern border of the United States.
Pues buenas tardes, good afternoon, or good evening. I want to talk, perhaps not I don't think I like to read from my book, but maybe talk about why is this happening in a place like in my country, El Salvador. The reason why I wrote this book, Caravan to the North, is because in many ways, I had this deep anger mixed with sadness about what's going on with the young people, the children in El Salvador. Why is it that all these children decide to leave, families decide to go? Entire neighborhoods are leaving to come to a place called the land of opportunities, the land of dreams, the land where they can find milk and honey. And for a lot of people, it might be that way. But for many of our young people, it's not that way. What they encounter is a nightmare. It's sadness, it's depression. It's also a land without any opportunities whatsoever for them. For some of them, it might work, But what is the cost of all that? What is the cost of that? We have children that are living, for example, are living El Salvador at a very young age. Children that most of the time, most of times they had very little school, and when they come over here, their families have to, if they do make it across, they have to have one or two or even three jobs. The kids don't have much opportunities to go to school, or if they do, is a very precarious thing, So just a little bit of background, just a little bit of background. I came in when I was 19 years old, and I've been following um, these experiences since then. I've been writing books about these issues since then. I had visit borders since 1984. I started doing this kind of work, going back and forth, and it's really, 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 really sad to know that the situation hasn't really changed that much for immigrants. I'm 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 I'm, uh, I'm really upset to know that the United States, one of the biggest, richest country in the world, put children in cages, jail children. Children who are leaving their countries because they don't have any opportunities, families that don't have any opportunities. They come fleeing violence, lack of opportunities, and then when they finally get across, now they gotta go across two friend countries, Guatemala and Mexico, and finally the United States. Those are really is a really dangerous trip. When they finally come over here, they put them in jail. They separate their families. That's something really, 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 really sickening in the heart and the mind and the spirit of these children, the families. What happened to a child's mind, heart, spirit when it's separated from the family that he loves, the only family that he knows or she knows. Is is horrific. To see, to know that this has been going on for many, 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 many years. I left El Salvador in 1980. I came across, I was lost in the desert. I was put in jail in Central California. I finally landed in San Francisco, and I had visited these centers recently. A year ago, I was in Mexico, and I went to some shelters, and I went to some borders, Tijuana, El Paso. Same thing is going on. Same thing. Young women being raped, young men being a slave of drugs, cartels. Um, you name it. It's a situation that it hasn't really changed. And when these people finally come to the United States, there's no there's we I think that the what I'm trying to say here is that the human heart, we should embrace these children, these young people, when they're coming. There's no reason why they should be put in jail, especially when they're fleeing hard situations like Central America. Where there's a war on gangs going on here. And it's really sickening, because these children that are part of these gangs, they of course they are violent. I'm not saying the contrary, but at the same time, They're children without any opportunity, and they join gangs because they they lack the essence of life, the family love, the love that should come from politicians, from the presidents of our nations, but we don't have that. What we have is oppression, repression, and lack of opportunities, back and forth and left and right, and above and beyond. It's really sad to see that these young people wants to experience what it is to have an opportunity. They have a dream, and they in the case of this caravan to the north book, I heard that there were some large numbers of Central Americans leaving Honduras, and then eventually they were a week later, in September, October, last a couple of years ago, they were forming a group to leave El Salvador. I was there, and I said, "Oh, I'm going to see these people," because in the news, all you heard is that there were robbers, um, who were leaving because they were members of gangs, and they had a lot of problems with the law, and that's why they were leaving. And who knows what with what other words they were described. They were described with all these horrible words. So I said, I'm gonna go see these people. And I went to the square where they were meeting, and sure enough, they were humble, hardworking people that that was sick and tired of living a life without any opportunities. Young people they had no they see no opportunities in their hometowns, because there's a lot of gang activities, and in some cases they had been they were um, they were asked to join gangs, and they said, well, I don't want to be part of a gang. I want to live. So I interview a lot of people on that evening that I spent in this uh, the divine savior of the world is called the square where they were meeting to leave the following day. They were meeting, I think, on October, somewhere in the last days of October, and so I spent the evening with them, and I met this young boy. I changed the name, of course, for the book. Um, in my book, his name is Misael. He told me his story, where he was coming from and why he was leaving. And my God, is the story is the story of hope. Is the story of somebody who really, 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 really want to put forward his dream, and he's coming with his whole family. He was joined with his family to go in this caravan. I mentioned a while ago that I went to Mexico a couple of years ago. I that evening that I spent there with these young people and other Salvadorians, I went to Mexico to do some presentations, and I met this caravan back in Mexico. And again, they told me all these atrocities that occurred to them in the way they walk the 3,000 miles, all the way from El Salvador to Guatemala, Mexico. We're going the United States. They come with smiles, you know, they come with hope, with big dreams of really coming across, you know. But they were, in some places they were meet as heroes, and some places they were met as, because of the news kept on saying that some of these caravans were filled with or were a mixture of criminals that were coming, you know, and because of that, in some places these caravans were seen as a threat. And so in Mexico City, they in the borders of Mexico, and even in Mexico City as well, they had some problems because they were welcoming them, but at the same time they were saying, "No, you know, these people, they're really troublemakers, and we don't want them here." So there were these discussions of, do we want them here? You know? So they kept on going, regardless. You know, they kept on going, and finally, they got to Tijuana. But let me tell you, the beauty of these travelers, you know, is when I heard these stories, you know, they talk with so much love about the people, the humble people that run those shelters, you know, how they embrace them, you know, they had programs for them, they had books for them, they tried to make their life as easy as possible, you know, and they give them clothes, they give them a beautiful shelter, you know, a place to feel that they were welcome, you know. But when they, in my book, when they finally got to Tijuana, you know, they finally get to Tijuana, they think that some of these people are humble people that had never traveled from their hometowns, you know. So I don't know what idea they had about the border, but they thought that probably they would be easy to come across, you know. But when they finally get to the border, they come to the realization that it's really hard to get across, you know, and it's not as easy. And so this young man named Misael gets separated from his family. This happens in the book, you know. It's separated from his family, and when he finally come to his senses, you know, that he's basically lost. He says, "Well, you know, I have a dream." He says, "I have a dream that I'm and instead of going to the north, to the United States, I went back to where I belong, to El Salvador." So I really believe that people who work in the border, that people, I really believe that this government, the United States, should have more compassion for the people who are coming from places like El Salvador, Latin America. You know, we should welcome with open hearts and arms these children.
So thank you so much, Jorge. And now I'm going to turn to Dr. Lawrence Taylor, who is a writer and anthropologist. He divides his life between Ireland and Southern Arizona. And Dr. Taylor is Emeritus Professor of Anthropology at Maynooth. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but Maynooth University, as part of the National University of Ireland. He is also a research associate with the Center for Latin America Studies here at the University of Arizona. His many nonfiction books and articles explore the life of both regions, including 3 books done in collaboration with photographer Mav Hickey, The Road to Mexico, Tunnel Kids, and Ambos Nogales, Intimate Portrait of the US-Mexico Border. Inspired by the wonders and ironies of border life, he has turned to fiction with Tales from the Desert Borderland, a collection of 8 linked short stories that take the reader along the desert border from San Diego to Nogales. Dr. Taylor brings an ethnographer's eyes, ears, and many years of experience to this fictional portrait of life along the US-Mexico desert border.
Thanks very much for having me. I'm in obviously very distinguished company. My own work is very different, not only aimed at adults, but aimed, although people in the stories cross the border continuously, pretty much in every story, the stories are really focused on life at the border on both sides of it. And I was struck over many years of working on the border by the variety of communities and types of people that live and work in the border region. And I thought a lot of that was escaping the general public's attention, who were focused more narrowly on certain aspects of border life. So in these stories, I tried to show the range of lives on the border and the way in which, sometimes dramatically, sometimes more subtly, the border and the desert, it's a desert border, impacts on people's lives and their creative responses to that. The stories are linked in that they begin in San Diego at the border and end in Nogales, and they move from west to east that way. And a minor character in one story becomes a major character in the next. And so the reader is pulled continuously from one scene and group of people to another. I'm going to read a edited version, but a complete version of the first story, Machaca. But you'll find the fuller version, as Lisa said, online. I've cut out a lot of bits, but kept the storyline. And in it, you'll meet two characters, especially, both of whom reappear in stories further down the line. So with that, I go to Machaca. Ana Rosa pulls into the gravelly yard to find a clutch of strangers, men, women, and children waiting in the dawn shadows near the Abuelita kitchen door. She's not surprised. Jimenez had texted the number 10. One of them, a young man, approaches, tentative, shy eyes, surprised, comforted, disconcerted. She looks like us, but different. Teeth whiter, hair cut short with a blonde streak. Will Luisa look like that in a few years when we're all Americans? Ana Rosa offers only a business smile, ushering them through a door leading into the basement. They troop wordlessly down and settle themselves in among the sacks of dried beans and rice to wait. At noon, Orozco pushes heavily through the front door of the restaurant as if performing a search warrant. Clark follows but pauses to admire a colorful mural of life in the eponymous Abuelita's tropical village, brightening the walls, padding respectfully through the dining room as if it were a path through the pueblito. He takes a chair opposite Orozco, who has found a seat in a dimly lit corner facing into a large mirror with a view of everything and everybody behind him, eyes in the back of his head, like a good fella at a favorite pasta palace. But Orozco's gun is in plain sight, holstered besides other dangling tools of the law enforcement trade. I'll take that table myself, Ana Rosa nods toward the two men in uniform. I already heard about that fat pocho bastard. Of all the restaurants in this fucking town, they come here, and today, que pinche vida, let me deal with him. Patting her already perfect coif, she sets off through the swinging door into the dining room. Orozco has picked up the menu, his deeply lined face a battleground between hope and disdain as he recites the names of the dishes. Caldo de albóndigas, pozole de Jalisco, intoning them like poetry, like sacred texts. His eyes well up with longing as the words roll about in his mouth, conjuring warm chatter and pungent aromas of his tia Josefina's kitchen. Then his face darkens, like a toddler whose scoop of ice cream has tipped off the cone and landed on his shoe. If he orders any of those beautiful dishes, he'll be served only disappointment. Then a slip of paper falls from the menu, a hasty scribble of today's especial. He reads it aloud with an exaggerated Sonoran lilt, as if the word announced the second coming. Machaca! As if any place in this town could deliver on such a promise. Ana Rosa gulps. She hadn't okayed that dish. Damn that pedote Bustamante. The new chef she hired only yesterday, a Sonorense from some godforsaken hole near Hermosillo. Chef. Puebla has chefs, Michoacan, Oaxaca, La Capital, but the land of sand, cattle, narcos, and kidnappers through which everybody must make his painful way. Norte? What have they got to cook? Stringy cattle and tortillas de harina are not a cuisine. Chef, he showed up for his first day this morning holding a filthy sack she feared was his laundry and emptied it right onto her clean cutting counter. An avalanche of chilies, aguacates, nopales, and a dozen sacks of dried, shredded God knows what, all the time raving in a meth-induced ramble about real Sonoran food and how you couldn't get it in California. Not everybody wants esos chingados tacos de pescado. Gripping her order pad, she risks a knowing nod at Orozco. Señor Bustamante, nuestro chef es sonorense. Debe ser machaco auténtica. Authentic? Orozco is sure she's bluffing, and as if to raise the bet, orders platters for both Clark and himself. That woman, he explains to Clark, is from Michoacan. She doesn't know machaca from caca. And if there's a Sonora in her kitchen, he's probably some chingado mojado. You watch, his chile machaca is going to run over the plate like diarrhea, and his day's going to end real bad when I haul his skinny ass in. Orozco is cheered by the thought of any impending arrest, but having Clark there again, looking up to him with that callow beach boy face, his smile deepens with nostalgia. He remembers Clark's first day on the job, a poster boy for everything wrong with the patrol, softly focused green eyes, harmless grin, and loose waves of street hair peeking out from under his cap, another good-looking, empty-headed surfer drifting through his life and the perfect San Diego seasons. Nothing soldier about him. Yet there was something that drew Orozco to the boy, despite himself. Even though constantly embarrassed by his own clumsy ignorance, Clark was clearly entranced by the vibrant cacophony of life on the other side of the fence. Orozco watched with amusement as his partner encountered the often unexpected and sometimes poetic moments of border life, like when the little girl in a pure white First Communion dress suddenly scampered away from her proud parents to offer him una paleta through the chain links. Over the weeks and months, Orozco slowly dropped his jaded drill instructor act, becoming instead an increasingly enthusiastic tour guide to a world he regarded as his own. They were a comical pair, especially walking the jumping border streets. Clark, slim, though thickening a bit on border lunches, beach boy tan, green eyes, shuddering like a camera in constant surprise. Orozco towering over him, unabashedly huge, strolling like the emperor through a sea of parting subjects, gray-flecked black mustache and darker eyes that saw all, even while staring unblinkingly ahead. Vigilant for any chink in his nation's armor, Orozco was equally alert to cuisine, taking Clark on critical tours of every rolling taqueria in an endless quest for the perfect taco. And while they ate, Clark got Spanish lessons, Orozco laughing and making him repeat every word or phrase till he got it right. Each meal reminded Orozco of others, the features of which he liked to recount in detail and with great affection, especially those consumed at his tia's. Every Sunday it was pozole. They were taking a dinner break in their car on the beach, assorted tacos soaking through the ripped open paper bags spread between them on the seat. To their left, the border fence cut through the sand and continued several dozen yards into the Pacific Ocean, an emphatic statement of the prevailing moral geography. Clark had spent much of his life on such beaches, only without fences or other signs of limit or containment, water and sand without end or an ending. Orozco was chewing and talking. See, you got to use the right ingredients. The homini's got to be good, of course, but it's the chiles that make the difference. Guajillos, they have to come from the DF, man, la capital. Oh, the pot would simmer away there all morning when we came by. First as kids, later with our own families. And my mama and tia would cook together tamales, tostadas, rellenos, todo, man. We fucking ate all day. Where was that, your tia's? Clark knew that Orozco was from southern Arizona, but he was becoming increasingly sensitive to the particularity of place. Nogales. We call it ambos Nogales, both Nogales, because there's one on each side of the border. We were born and grew up on this side. My tia Chada was the other side, just south of Nogales in a ranchito called Ciputa. That's where we'd get together. Hola, hola. Two little boys were dangling over the water from the chain links on the Mexican side of the fence, shouting enthusiastically. When Orozco and Clark turned to watch through the windshield, they dropped into the sea with yelps of glee. Orozco chuckled despite himself, but quickly turned to one of his favorite other topics, telling Clark about a particularly clever arrest he had made, popping up behind the last man in a line that had just made its silent way in the dark of night around that very fence. Do you ever feel funny? I mean, does it bother you to be arresting Mexicans all the time? As soon as the words were out, Clark was sorry he spoke. Orozco met his young partner's hesitant look with a hard stare, but then continued in a voice of patient instruction. Mira, look, some guys are divided inside, not me. I got no trouble with who I am. I'm American. It's that simple. My father was a Marine. He fought in Korea and lost his brother there. And I was a Marine in Iraq. When I got home, I just put on a different uniform. Clark nodded sheepishly, as if he hoped Orozco didn't think he dared question his loyalty to a country that Clark himself had all his life taken absolutely for granted. If other people have a problem with that, if they can't see Americans, Mexican American as American as any Italian, Polish, Black, Jewish, Irish, or whatever the fuck flavor they happen to be American, then that's their problem. Clark was still nodding, but Orozco knew what he was thinking. None of those other American flavors went back and forth on a weekly basis to the land of their grandparents, nor were they poised at the border protecting America from an inundation of their relations. Orozco, however, managed to talk himself through any possible ambivalence. After all, his American experience, a series of traditions from Pozole to the Marines, defined and anchored him, perhaps on the edge of America, but still in it. Clark, on the other hand, couldn't help but feel that he had no such anchor, no such place, unless it was the beach. His eyes turned again to the bisecting fence and he gunned the patrol car into life. As Orozco buckled in, muttering about his crazy surfer partner, Clark took them bouncing over the rippled sand right at the warring water. He spun the wheel at the last moment and set off north along the sea edge, shooting back great arcing sprays of wet sand and water to the noisy approval of the kids, once again clambering up the fence on the other side. Back in the restaurant, Orozco has risen from his seat to inspect the mural of Abuelita's village, eyeing every detail skeptically, as if in the hope of exposing a forgery. Clark watches him as he wanders back to their table, sinking awkwardly into his chair. Orozco had asked for the assignment away from the border fences, where agents now sat unmoving in their cars. But he isn't happy here. Maybe it's the lack of a border in these neighborhoods. No clear line between himself and the world he now roams at will. Or maybe it's the absence of someone like Clark to guide, and in so doing, find for himself the unexpected beauty of a place that now is only ugly to him, somehow an affront to his childhood. Orozco wants to be disappointed, though that's not really the right word, doesn't really explain the smile, however grimace-like, that plays in the corner of his mouth. Maybe he needs every one of San Isidro's many Mexican lunchrooms to fail him, to keep his distance, to remind him of the imagined gulf that separates all of them from himself. Back in the kitchen, Hugo Bustamante rips open a plastic bag of machaca bought this morning from a desperate vaquero hawking sacks of the sun-dried shredded beef at the crossing. He tips the powdery dry contents into a sizzling skillet full of finely diced tomatoes, tomatillos, peppers, and onions, moistened by oil and tears shed from eyes stung by the searing chiltepin he has crumbled in for good measure. Ana Rosa is watching, impressed despite herself, but worrying that los malditos migras will smell more than lunch. She can't keep herself from looking at the door leading down into the basement. That slick pendejo was supposed to show up hours ago. She checks her watch and looks out the back window over the low fence to the alleyway, full of squawking kids and animals, but no pinche Jimenez. She turns back to Bustamante, who is arranging the platters with not a little artistry, and decides to follow him into the dining room. Orozco knows the lunch is coming well before he sees it, and reluctantly allows himself to believe what his nose is telling him, provoking a concatenation of images, postcards from his past, Machaca and Tia Josefina's, Machaca in his favorite Sonoita cafe, even the machaca he made as best he could from dried goat meat in Iraq. He's nearly dizzy with the remembered platillos when the material, heavy, unfired clay platter thuds on the table before him. The clumps of singed meat look and smell perfect, just slightly moist, a reddish brown punctuated by dots of red and green, no running liquid, and as aromatic as a spice stand. Clark is happy to see the rapture in his partner's eyes, but wonders how he'll handle such a lack of disappointment. But there's more. Orozco peels back the napkin covering a plate of tortillas and reveals a pile of neatly folded tortillas de agua. Fucking sobaqueras, can't believe it. Like a priest readying the altar cloth for mass, Orozco lifts one with the dainty tips of his sausage fingers and lets it drop open to reveal a delightfully thin and delicately seared tortilla the size of a pizza. These are pure Sonora. I spent hours watching my tia thinning the dough on her arm from the pit to the hand. That's why we call them sobaqueras. It's the lady's sweat that gives them the flavor. Then she cooked them a few seconds on each side on a cooker made from an oil drum with a disco de arado on the top, the disc they use on plows to prepare the earth for the wheat. They reuse to cook the tortillas. That's Mexico for you. These are the only tortillas big enough to make real burritos, but the best way to eat them is just like this. He rips off a piece and uses it to wad up a packet of machaca to stuff into his watering mouth. Ana Rosa is watching all this from a safe distance, but seeing Orozco's uncontained joy, she returns to the kitchen just in time to see Jimenez's battered blue handyman van rattle through the alley gate into the yard. I'm going to get them out while those two are busy eating, okay? The Michoacanos clatter noisily up the wooden stairway from the basement and line up behind the van with their backpacks, like kids going on a school outing. Ana Rosa is finally ready to exhale when the dining room door swings suddenly inward behind her. She spins around to find herself confronted by the hulking Migra diner. His face is astonished as it is joyous. I have to meet the cabron who made that machaca. Ana Rosa nervously backs away from him toward the door leading to the yard in a vain attempt to block any view of the would-be Americans milling about the truck. Clark, who has followed Orozco into the kitchen, takes in the whole scene and waits breathless for his old partner to bring down the hammer. But Chef Hugo steps into the breach, rattling his cast iron skillet on the burner where more machaca is singeing. "Pa acá, caballero," he shouts, drawing Orozco to him with a wide wave of his tattooed arm, wafting the rich odors of charring meat and chilies throughout the kitchen. Ana Rosa is left facing Clark, following his eyes out the back door where Jimenez is finally ready to pilot his sputtering van through the gate into Greater California. But Clark has turned to watch Orozco, happy to see him leaning over the cook pot, poking a fat finger into the skillet as he settles his other great paw on Hugo Bustamante's bony shoulder. His eyes are closed, his nostrils flared, his face softened in serene recall. I won't take up too much more time, but just to say that a number of things really struck me over the years of working as an anthropologist in the region and meeting, such a wide range of characters. One was the variety of people, as I said earlier, but also I think the the great ambiguity and ambivalence of the border and everything about it. And I wanted in that story to give some sense of that with the relatively rare subjects of the Border Patrol agents, among whom I spent a lot of time, as well as among migrants and people living in the various communities. So that hopefully, and also I guess the humor, because I found myself often laughing on the border amidst situations of every kind and every description. But I felt the ironies and Black humor of the border was again something missing from a lot of accounts. So try to give a sense of that here. And of course, food, which in my experience is always important, but it's certainly very, very important to the identity of people in this region.
Do you test your stories on people who have lived the experiences you're writing? Like, do you share them as you're developing them at any point? And if so, what was their reaction and how did that inform the final piece? And that's for any of you to answer.
Well, I certainly did because aside from the actual field experience I had as an anthropologist, I've lived on and off in the border region and know personally all the kinds of people that I've written about and the situations that I write about. And yeah, at various stages, I've certainly had people read them. And the characters are sometimes, well, they're all based on actual human beings that I know, sometimes more compositely than others, but you do want, or at least I always wanted to get that kind of feedback.
Okay, what about you, Diane? When you write your books, do you ever try them out on the people whose experiences you're describing, and how does that impact the further development of your story?
Well, the children's stories, not really. I kind of take it from, I've been working with children and families for 40 years. And so I take it back in terms of somewhat of a composite, but also think of particular experiences and then let it kind of, I call it percolate, and let it just kind of sit there. And then literally I will sit down and it'll come. Maybe it'll percolate for 2 weeks and then it'll just write itself. And that's kind of the way it works for the children's books. For the ones that I've written about adults, they are composites of different kinds of experiences across different types of groups, ethnic groups, etc., and historical. I mean, way back, going to my great-grandparents, all the way to to the present day. And again, it kind of comes together in a unique way inside of me after I let it kind of sit there and sizzle for a while.
Thanks. Jorge?
With this particular book of the caravans, I was so eager, and I was lucky in many ways and unlucky, because right after the book came out, the book was published right away, because it was such a it was the topic of the time, when I wrote it, I wrote it really quickly, so I didn't have time to be sharing with friends, I just wanted to get the story out because it was such a story, a contemporary story. I mean, and for me, it's very important to tell the story. Of course, my characters are fiction characters, but they're rooted on reality. So sometimes I went to radio stations and spoke about this subject and talk a little bit, do a little readings about the book, but I was told by the publishers, don't do it, or wait until the book is out. That's the way they like it. But in the other hand, I wish I done more of it, because right after the book came out, it came this COVID-19, you know. So the life span of the book was encountered by that, by this horrific sickness, you know.
Right.
I just wanted to say one more thing. Because I'm in social welfare, and clinically in it as well, get a lot of in-depth about things that happen to people. So I think that plays into it as well too. So that people come to me as students, clients, etc., with a total story, an in-depth story of their life. So these kind of are there, a library in my head of all these experiences, which then I kind of put together.
Well, I think that's kind of true for all three of you, as you described. Jorge, you spoke about speaking to people who've been in a couple caravans and in Mexico and El Salvador, and hearing their stories, their experiences, and that feeds into what you wrote. And Larry, you've done a lot of anthropological work, field work, where you've talked to people and hung out with them and heard their stories. And and Diane, you just explained yours. And I was just wondering if you all spoke a little bit about the reason you wrote these books and and I was wondering if you felt like the readers, if you've gotten any feedback from your readers, were they successful in your goals of creating empathy and understanding and getting to really people, because our policies aren't about people and your stories are. They bring the humanity back into the situation. That's why they make us cry. That's why they have hope in them. And I'm just wondering if you've heard back from readers, if you've gotten any feedback, have they met your goals for writing the story?
I had something very interesting that happens to me. Not with this particular book, I have another book. It's called Jimena Perez Can Fly. And it's about a little girl who lives El Salvador as well, And I went to New Mexico, I think, I have a library. I have founded three, we call them libraries, but they're really places for children to come and meet books, sort of saying, for instance, we go to a marketplace and we found a wall, and we put books for the children, and they come and they read and they color and they enjoy themselves. It's very beautiful, So anyway, a number of kids, they used to they come to this to this Saturday, Sunday book club, sort of saying, Suddenly there was this young girl that I used to see, and then I didn't see her anymore, And I went to New Mexico, or I mean, Texas, I think, for a presentation. Sure enough, there's this young lady jumping. She's jumping, and I said to the lady who brought me to the school, I said, I'd like to see who the young girl is, I want to meet her. So we went and meet her. Remember me? It's me, Jimena. I changed her name, of course, And she's been through the whole thing, she left El Salvador. She jumped in the train, the beast, her mother was arrested. She was arrested. They were separate, but she got a bracelet. She got a bracelet, She got a bracelet that says, "I'm a little hero." She said that some people that came to the shelter and brought books. She said, "You know what? Those books that I saw in the shelter remind me of the books that you used to bring us to the market." She's telling me, because of those books, I kept on smiling. I kept on going, So she said, "And you know what? I want you to have this." She said, she took her bracelet, she gave it to me. So I said, "I'm gonna write this story," So I wrote this story. So it's kind of like the other way around of what your question, but I think that it's a way of honoring these people, you know.
Right. Right. And Diane, that gives you some feedback on the books that you put into the shelters, that you gifted to the shelters. They probably were very meaningful to those children.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So, Larry, I have a question for you. As an, you're an anthropologist. You spent half of your life in Ireland. You're originally from the East Coast of the United States. And I was wondering, what drawbacks and advantages do you see of fiction being written by an anthropologist? And do you worry about cultural appropriation when telling fictionalized tales based on oral histories or fieldwork observations?
Yeah, well, I think about these things. I don't worry about them, but I do think about them. I think, well, I think that everybody has their own angle. One of the things about the border in particular, or the kind of enterprise that I've set out on, is that I'm dealing with a range of very different communities with very different experiences. And in some ways, not being a member of any one of them gives you a fairer sense of all of them and of the connections among them, of not having skin in the game that way, of having something at stake to see things one way or another. And oddly, my whole life has been like that, I have to say, as an anthropologist. As you mentioned, I'm from the East Coast, I'm from New York, which I describe actually as a small island off the East Coast of the US. My work in Ireland, which I did a lot, was always from this other perspective, but from the perspective of someone who lived and lives in Ireland for a long time and knows the place very well, but always from an outside point of view. And I think in my work in this part of the world, as I say, I'm able to see and to be drawn to a great range. So in these stories, you meet not only Border Patrol and migrants, and not only Mexicans and Mexican Americans, but retirees, sunbirds, wildlife rangers, Native Americans in the Tohono Reservation, where I spent a good bit of time as well. And what I've tried to do there is to have a sense of them that's come from a long time with them and a long time of listening and watching, but also a sense of them from a certain distance, of seeing this world on the contours of the world from the outside as well. So I think I was looking at some of the questions that people were asking actually, and I think sometimes the vision I find, the vision of border communities, understandably because of the fraughtness of the politics, can lead to a romanticization and a flattening in some ways of characters one way or the other as either very good or very evil. And I'm always impressed in living with this range of people, how inadequate a description that is of people and their motivations. If you look at migrants, for example, the discourse, the public discourse pushes in the opposite direction, as Jorge mentions, of course, one we're all too familiar with, of dangerous criminals, and that can engender a kind of discourse in the opposite direction of sainted pilgrims. And most migrants, in my experience, are ordinary human beings with exactly the range of circumstances and motivations that people have, that you've met in other walks of life. So I think, going back to what Lisa said about the humanity of people, I do very much want people to see the complex humanity in an entertaining way, hence the stories. But I've always liked stories. I've always thought of myself as a writer who happens to be an anthropologist, rather than an anthropologist who discovered you have to write to be an anthropologist. So I like doing that. And also because I've worked with an artist, Maeve Hickey, the whose photographs you saw go by, and who I've worked with in a number of these books. She's always both pushed me in and enabled a more creative approach and a less academic approach to the world. But I'd like to think that the academic insights of an anthropologist are there in the stories. At least that's how they're being used. The book was only out a few months. It was timed perfectly for COVID. You know, it arrived in March and everything was canceled, every launch and event. So it's hard to answer about what the impact is, but it has already been used in classes as well as being read by the public, with an idea of getting students to see the varied nature of the border world, and also to think about some fundamental questions about human identity, which of course is central to that story, Machaka, in a quasi-humorous way. But the questions of identity are obviously important and very visible on the border for people on both sides, and especially those who cross.
Right. It's interesting that you characterize yourself as a writer, and then Jorge, when we spoke the other day, you characterize yourself as a storyteller. And when you said you wanted to talk about your book rather than read it, and somebody was asking why you chose to do it, that present yourself today that way.
Well, this is completely new to me, to be doing this, you know. I don't know how many people is watching, listening, to be honest with you. I hope there's a lot, you know. But the bottom line is that I try to be as happy as I can as a person. Let's put it that way. You know, I want to be a happy human being. You know, despite all these unhappy events that we describe in our stories. You know, so I'm talking to a group of students. I believe so, right? And I want them to know that that they probably know this, you know, but the humanity of the events that in my case, you know, or listening to the Dr. Lawrence, you know, so talking about his characters, you know, the border is a monster, you know, is a monster. The people that come from our countries have another story behind them, in front of them, you know. I love to read my work. Don't take me. There's nothing wrong with that. I love it, you know. But I guess in this for this type of talks, I guess, you know, I like to talk maybe about also my unhappiness with the United States more than any other country, you know, for what's going on with the children, you know. Most perhaps that's the bottom line, you know. I don't understand why does this country put children. I don't care, it's Democrats or Republicans, you know, whatever, you know, whoever is doing that, you know, it's plain wrong. It's plain wrong. So sure, I talk about that in my book, but I want to be more direct, you know, on saying it, on saying it. Shame in the United States, you know, one of the richest countries in the world, for putting our children in jail. You know, that makes me angry and saddened, you know, and sadden my heart, my soul, my spirit, you know. And I want to say it here loud and clear, you know. We should all demonstrate our anger against this or anybody who is doing that to our children.
Can I pick up on something that what Jorge just said? Well, this was going on. I wrote a very lengthy letter to the Secretary General of the United Nations asking him to censure our government. And I quoted, there's a Declaration of the Rights of Children, later the Convention on the Rights of Children. The United States was one of only 3 countries who didn't sign this. The other one was Somalia, and I can't remember the other. But in doing what we did to those children, we violated every single one of the articles, or at least I pointed out the main articles. There's a specific article which says that you cannot separate children and their parents, particularly children and mothers, unless it's for the good of the child. And it goes on, there's a number of them. Never even got a response back. Never even got a response. It was really so sad.
And somebody does ask about the crimes against humanity that could be persecuted by The Hague, but I guess if we didn't sign on, I don't know, are there any enforceable international laws regarding the treatment of asylum seekers? And I don't know if that's, in you guys' bailiwick to answer that. We did discuss some of these when we talked with Chairman Norris and others, not about the children, but about border rights and Indigenous people's rights. But there's a question here. This is addressed to you, Jorge. How has your firsthand experience as an immigrant granted you an understanding that unless you are an immigrant, there are many things one cannot understand or know that you do know as an immigrant? In what way do you think your lived experience is different in your understanding than people who have been American citizens since birth here?
Well, that's a very tough question, Let's put it that way. It's a really tough question because I've been in the United States, what now, over 40 years, So I go back and forth to El Salvador now. I was just there a few weeks ago, and I got back here just a couple of weeks ago, basically, the problems that were going on in El Salvador when I left, they're not there anymore. The political problems that were not, there's no work going on, but there is another type of work going on. You see what I'm saying? But I no longer have any friends there. I have very few family members. I'm living here in the States, but I don't feel. I think I left El Salvador many years ago, but El Salvador never left my heart, And I want to go back, but I don't know where to go back to. You see what I mean?
No, I understand. Yeah.
So it's like no, there's no border for that. It's just your own. It's just your own imagination. It's just your own sadness. It's just your own country. I guess those. In my case, because I tend to romanticize this idea of what used to be, what I dreamed El Salvador would be like once I get back. It's not there. So I guess I want to write books that talk about hope, even though there's this hardship on it too, So to answer your question, I can say that on writing there is no borders. Me as I come from an indigenous background, I have no borders in my heart. I have no borders in my mind and my spirit, So I try to write like that. And El Salvador is just another place that fills my heart with emotions, I try to see beauty everywhere I go.
I have visited El Salvador, and it is beautiful and sad.
Mm.
Yeah. I'm going to close this off with one final question that I'd love it if each of you could to comment on if there, what are you working on now? Where, you know, these are books that either recently come out or came out a little while ago. What do you have in the works for the future?
Is that me?
For each of you. You
Oh.
can start if you want.
I just yesterday I finished a book. Let's send it to these agents that I have. You know, this is in their hands now, and it's called With Sapan. I shouldn't be talking about it.
Called what?
With Sapan. With Sapan.
Oh,
I spent almost 8 months in El Salvador due to this COVID-19. You know. And I from the capital, which is San Salvador, I had all these experiences, people misbehaving and behaving and fear and anger because of the sickness, you know. And then I traveled from San Salvador, the capital, to this small town where I'm from, you know. And El Salvador is a crowded place. It's 7 million of Salvadorians, you know, they fill all the streets. This traffic is like crazy. There was nobody on the streets, you know. Wow. It was very beautiful and very sad, you know. You can hear all the birds and the wind and the trees blowing and the beauty of the landscape. You can really enjoy it. And then you see people with their mask covered in their forehead and their earrings here, but not on their mouth. You know? So anyway, I got to leave it. I got to my hometown, you know, and these are campesino people, you know, indigenous people whom speak Nahuatl and mix Nahuatl with the Spanish, you know, and it's their way of life is so rich and so beautiful, you know. And I didn't know that I was having a workshop there. I spent 8 months, you know. So when I came to the United States like 2 weeks ago, all those stories, my agent said, so do you have anything for me? I said, sure, you know, let me. And I wrote it on 2 weeks, you know. I wrote it on 2 weeks, and apparently something that she really likes, you know. With Sapan means river of thorns in our Nahuatl, you know. And to me is a name that really describes what the character of these people, you know, because they behave in such a way that it represents their struggle in life, you know, why they act, they behave that way, you know. So my book is about these characters, you know, these old characters, you know, and how they live through this pandemia, you know.
Wonderful. We'll look forward to reading it.
Okay.
And Larry, what are you working on?
It's very hard to describe. I think a magical realist memoir, which is a return to the shores of Donegal, where I first did anthropological fieldwork, and to which I've returned very often in the northwest of Ireland, but with unexpected apparitions from my own family ancestors who are not from there at all. And so something on the collision of culture that might animate my work in general, but an exposure of it in that way. So that, and then something more to do with this border. My mind is always, it's not only me who goes back and forth between Ireland and the border. Everything I do is in one place or another, but in this part of the world, I have some recipe books from a woman that I know in Nogales that were passed down through her family. You could tell I have a food obsession as well from that story, but the recipes were her family's recipes, but they also trace the whole history and a very complicated history of that family and its movements and intermarriages and murders and crises. So it seemed to me a very interesting way to tell a story about the border through these books of recipes. So that's the other thing I'm working on.
Sounds delicious and interesting. And Diane, I know you have several books coming up.
Yeah, I have a number of different projects kind of on the fire. In the spring, a book called 21 Cousins for Children will be coming out. And what I did is the aim of the book was to show the diversity within Latinos, you know, because the first time I wrote a book, the illustrator made all the girls have black hair that was straight and had bangs, right? And in my family, we look all different kinds of ways. And I grew up with people looking literally all different kinds of ways, from redheads to very, you know, people who were dark skinned, plus multiple talents. And so the book isn't just about appearance, it's also about different talents and abilities and disabilities. I have 3 children with disabilities in it because to make them visible, but we don't focus on the disability, we focus on other aspects of them. So we have a Down's child, we have a child who is in a wheelchair, and we have a child who is borderline diabetic, you know. So it's a whole thing of understanding diversity, and yet the whole thing is about we're all familia still, and that's how we see each other. I have another book, as soon as we figure out the illustrations. It's a nonsense book of children's nonsense poetry that I focus on the kind of things that boys would like, and girls who are more like me, who are not girly girls. And that some parents might not like too much because it's pretty way out there. That will be, you know, that one already has a publisher. We just need to work on the illustrations. I feel guilty about a whole passel I've had of, I did an ethnographic study many years ago of individuals 89 to 100 years old who had lived through the Mexican Revolution, and asked about their experience as children, and asked about their experiences as children and how it impacted across their lives. And unfortunately, in the middle of getting it transcribed, the person ran off with my money. So I still have to try and find a transcriber so that I can put that together. I have a whole series of short stories for adults that were written and published in various journals that I put together that I'm looking, they've already published, so I have to find someone who's willing to do it. And the theme of it is, and the way I see it, and the way it ties in with what we've been doing today is, it's how larger historical events impact the trajectory of individual people's lives. So I start with the Mexican Revolution and how it changed things. And I take, the first one is my great-grandmother, who I had till I was 17, I had great-grandfather till I was 23. So I have lots of old people I talked to and knew very, very closely. It shows the changes, particularly women, and how women managed to support each other during this particular time. The next thing is my grandmother with the mujeres robadas. She was stolen during the Mexican Revolution. And then it goes on, it does Vietnam War, it does all these things. And you see, you're really focusing on individuals, but you see how historical events are not just historical events, they really impact individuals and families and change their lives forever. That's where I'm at.
That's true. Well, I want to thank you all. And I will say, please support independent booksellers and authors and buy their books and read them. I know I have a book list now that I'm going to go and purchase. So we'll look forward to all of your new books, Jorge, Diane, and Larry. And it's been a pleasure spending a little bit of time with you this evening. Thank you for sharing your heartfelt stories.
Thank you for having us.